Good morning, everyone. Thank you for supporting the ceremony. It's really lovely to generate that energy together. This morning, earlier, I was thinking about something. My mind was doing a little meandering, and along the lines of creating a project for myself. A couple of years ago, I invented a little game as part of a children's Dharma talk. It's called I See You There and I'm So Happy. And this morning I realized that I have a basic edition, an expanded edition, and an advanced game. That's where my mind was going after breakfast. It was kind of fun though. And I thought I would share it with you though. It's a very fun little game. And it's very simple. So the way I see you there and I'm so happy works is to use your eyes to look around and find something that you will identify and focus on. And you take 3 breaths in and out while you say to yourself, as you connect with the thing that you're seeing. Like I might look forward and just see Ramona's water bottle, right? And I look at that water bottle and I breathe in and out 3 times while I say to myself, I see you there and I'm so happy. I see you there and I'm so happy. I see you there and I'm so happy. And that's how the game works, right? And that's like a turn around, a turn in the game. And then you get to, shuffle and, find something else to look at. And you practice again. And you observe what happens. Now, just like if you were playing a dice rolling game, sometimes you roll well, sometimes you don't roll well. Right? And sometimes you choose something and you connect with it with these words and this intention, and it doesn't connect. And sometimes it does. And the idea is to play the game like that and observe what happens. That's the basic version of the game. Do you want to try it? It gets particularly interesting if you look at people. But you can start with non-people objects of your awareness. So you look around, you find something you're going to look at, something you can identify, and then connect with it with that intention. I see you there. I'm looking at the microphone stand right now. I see you there, and I'm so happy. 3 breaths. And then change it up. Look somewhere else. Find something else in your visual scope of things. Land on it with your awareness. When your 3 breaths are finished and you've settled in and that's okay, that's what happened there, change it up, go to another one. Keep moving around and eventually try landing on somebody, some person. Cool. We did a few rounds. Yeah. From my vantage point, the room looks different because I could see all of your faces. So that's the basic version of the game, the basic edition. So I'm gonna make this. Expanded, you want to hear the expanded edition? Okay. I didn't think ever played games like Catan or something like that. Basically expanded. Okay. The expanded edition of this game involves using all of your senses, not just your eyes. So there's some more complexity there. So it's a whole another way of connecting, whole other realms of connecting. You can connect through eyes and the intention and the meaning and the breathing, and do it with sounds. Do it with smells. I smell you there. And I'm so happy. Right? So it's not exactly the same like finding something out here to smell, but you have to tune into your sense of smell. Just like your eyes are looking around for something to focus on, you tune into your sense of smell, and okay, the smell that I smell, and I'm so happy. My ear is hearing whatever sound is there, and okay, find one sound and listen. Okay. Taste. I just had one of those little Ricola throat things. I have a lot of taste in my mouth. I could practice with that. Or I feel you in my body. Or with my body. I feel you there. And there's one more that's like a sensory perception that you can go to, which is in your mind. And this is the really expanded version, right? So inside, there's, excuse me, inside there's sensations and things happening in terms of what we're thinking. So for example, when you were using your eyes, because eyes are also a part of the expanded game, when you're using your eyes, you might look at something and not feel the connection and be like, oh, I'm resisting this. Okay, now I'm going to see my resistance and play with my resistance. Okay. Breathing in and with my mind as the focal point, I'm aware of my resistance to wanting to feel happy. And I'm going to smile. I'm going to be so happy that my resistance is there. Right? And find why and how that works. Right? So we're getting into the advanced edition as you go through the door of the expanded edition, and I haven't really clarified all of that and the ups and downs and ins and outs yet, but I'm working on it. So look forward to a future release. Date not set yet. I'm scared of this blue marker because it looks different. I'm worried it's going to be like a permanent thing, but it's not. Okay, it's dry erase. Okay, so we're going to make this diagram a little more complex. All through our retreat, we've been practicing to come home into present moment awareness, and we've been using conscious breathing as a base. We've been using our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body senses as a base for that. And here I'm adding them to the diagram here. These are the doorways for us to experience the world that appears to be around us, outside of us, and all around us. impressions come in through the eyes. Our eyes open, and if they're in good enough condition, the retina in the back of the eye receives an impression of light and shadow and color. It's interesting, it receives it upside down and backwards. But it receives an impression of what's around us, and then the optic nerve takes that impression, twists it around a few more times just to make sure that there's some error, and brings it back into the brain where we recreate that as supposedly what we're seeing outside of us. It's a doorway through which the world around us comes into the space of the mind and the heart. Same with the ears. Sounds and vibrations come in, and we then, as they enter in, they come into the mind and the heart. And here we begin that process of making sense out of them. So our perception happens, percept happens, and then we interpret it. We ascribe a story to it. We say that light coming through like that is called red, and the other one yellow, the other one green, blue, right? And we recreate in our heart and mind with our language and languages an interpretation of the reality which is around us. Through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body senses. All of that comes in. So this is another way of saying present moment experience. The present moment of life is something that we connect with through our senses. And you notice how this is set up. There's a little bit of a distance between the mind and the heart and present moment experience. The sensory impressions that we receive before we interpret them, before we ascribe some meaning, some value or something to them, some definition in the mind, before we form them into concept, it's directly connecting us to the world. There's no filter there. And so that's what we're leaning into, right? As we walk through the day practicing mindfulness, to be in touch with our senses and with breathing and all of the tools that we have, walking and sitting and eating, all the ways that we are practicing to ground ourselves, is to be connecting with life as it is, present moment experience, the reality of things that are happening, and to do as little interpreting of that as possible so that we can continually be in touch with what's actually there. What often happens, though, is we just start living and taking the meaning that we ascribe to that experience as real. And so we stop receiving the signals of life and the present moment, or we don't pay attention to that input that's coming, and we focus only on what's spinning around in here. That's when we get lost. Lost in our thinking, lost in our strong emotional experiences, lost in the stories about our past and our fear of encountering those again, lost in our worries about what might happen in the future. All that stuff which is not directly associated with reality in the moment. We cut ourselves off. And we just dwell in here. This is a big part of finding our stability in our practice, will be the work of staying tuned in. And when we tune in to our senses, as simple as using our eyes to be in touch with something like in the game, to see something, right? And we are aware that we are seeing. Because we're aware that we are seeing, awareness is there, mindfulness is there, and seeing is happening, right? Because mindfulness is there, I can see that I'm seeing something, and I can also see that I'm thinking about it. And then I have a chance, like, to do the dance of working with my own perceptions and my own agitation inside, or my own reaction to what I'm seeing. And I also have a chance to learn about the kinds of things that are coming into my being through my eyes. The kinds of impressions that I'm receiving. And we talked about how when a seed manifests from consciousness, we can generalize, we can put it in a category, that if I allow this seed to be the prevalent, the dominant experience in my heart and mind, then I can expect that it's bringing me in a direction of wholesomeness and well-being, or I can expect that it might take me into that other category of not so feeling good, of ill-being and suffering. We can also see what's coming in through eyes and what kind of seeds are being watered in my consciousness. This space is such a powerful and beautiful space because the impressions of present moment experience come in, but also all the memories, all the habit energies, all the reactions also rise up into this space too. It's a very powerful place. It's the heart of our power as human beings, to be aware of what's going on in here. And so, if I see or hear something comes into the experience of my inner life, my heart and mind, an impression that I'm receiving from the world touches a seed of suffering in me, right? And that seed manifests. Now I can know that, oh, that sort of thing that I'm seeing, that I'm hearing, that sort of consuming that I'm doing is watering seeds of suffering in my consciousness. Now, most of the time when we hear and see things, it's not like one experience. It's actually got many layers to it. So it's probably like 5 or 6 different seeds popping up. And sometimes there is some suffering, and sometimes also some weird sense of joy along with it, right? or there's a mixture of things. And that's what we're learning to discern. What's the strongest part of this experience that I'm having? So for example, I might scan through articles on the news feed about what's going on in Israel, Palestine, and the violence and the terrible things that human beings are doing to each other could touch seeds of anguish and sadness in my consciousness. But there's also the seed in there of connection and compassion, which are also being touched. Right? So it's a complex experience. But what I need to do is stay in my awareness of those things so that I know how much of the suffering in me is being watered, is escalating, is growing, and how much of my understanding and compassion is growing. My experience is that in situations of very powerful suffering, I don't need a lot of information to keep my understanding and compassion alive. And so mostly when I'm reading those articles, I'm suffering. That suffering is not the suffering of Israel and Palestine. There is suffering there. But that suffering is the suffering in my heart and mind, in my consciousness. That's what I'm experiencing. I'm making some of it by doing that reading, by absorbing those stories. Don't give your power away. Right? I'm determining that for myself. I'm choosing to take that in. So I'm choosing to affect myself in that way. And I can choose differently also. So there you see, we don't want to just say, oh, this is happening and it's so horrible. Well, it is horrible on one dimension, and we are making a lot of the suffering that we're experiencing. Yeah, so we call this mindfulness of sensory impressions and the practice of mindful consuming, not just foods and drinks, which works the same way. Right? Being aware, bringing things into our body and observing what are the effects and knowing what's bringing about health and energy and what's not. And it's the same with the sense experiences. So as we walk through, especially in our modern life, as we walk through this world where we are so easily connected to information and impressions, right? Here's the interesting thing. Present moment experience is coming in through these, but part of present moment experience is other people's delusions too. And so you might be bringing in something which is someone else's opinion and not necessarily the ground of our shared reality, or it might be someone else's turmoil, right? And not necessarily the reality of your shared experience in the moment. So we call this practice putting a sentinel of mindfulness at the sense doors. So sentinel of mindfulness. A sentinel. We put a sentinel at our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body. We put a sentinel at these sense doors so that we can observe. And the sentinel is not a guard, right? The sentinel is the watcher. The sentinel is there to observe and see. And allows us, it's what it means is our mindfulness is here, is alive, and is present, noticing what's coming in. And in that way, as we learn what sorts of things bring us well-being and what sorts of things bring us suffering, we become better at managing that inner space and better at managing our daily life and making choices. So much of the mindfulness trainings are actually about this. When you think of this in relationship to the trainings, so much of what's in the trainings is about how to getting some inspiration as to how we might respond or act based on awareness of what's coming in and out. So there's 5 sentinels we need here, and there's that 6th sentinel that we need here, which is watching not this is already being watched, these doorways, it's this doorway here. That it's watching which seeds are moving up and settling down from our mind consciousness into store, and learning about that. So it goes together, the sentinels of mindfulness on the body senses, but also in the heart-mind sense. The reason why Buddhism considers the mind and the heart a sense organ is because it operates in the same way. When the eye, the organ of the eye is there, and there are forms and colors around it, seeing happens. So you have the subject, the object, and the consciousness of seeing. And the mind works the same way. There's the thinker, there's the thing thought about, and there's the thought. Right? So it works in the same way. So we consider the thinking experience to be a sensory organ. In the insight that brings us to the other shore that we chanted in the ceremony, is that sutra confusing to anyone? No. It has a lot in it, but it's also quite simple. It's about going through the door of not separate self, of interbeing, of emptiness, and touching a deeper dimension of reality. And how if we do that, it releases us from the grasping and the clinging and the attachment that we have to things, right? And we have a more direct relationship. So it's releasing the attachment and the grasping that might be in here, so we have a direct relationship with life around us and within. And in it, it talks about all the major Buddhist systems of teaching. It talks about the 5 skandhas, the form, feeling, perception, mental formation, and consciousness. That's the first thing. It says every single one of these, right? It's worth investigating deeply, all of these things, because nothing here is truly graspable. Right? All of this has another dimension to it, right? So we don't need to be attached to and suffer because of. And then it goes through the 18 realms of elements. You're like, what? The 18 realms of elements are eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. 6. The forms, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the touch, and the objects of thought, the thing thought about. And then the consciousness of seeing, hearing, and so on, and thinking. So it's just a way of breaking down this teaching, calling it a name. 18 realms of elements, or 18, let's say, phenomenon. Yeah. And then it goes on to the 12 links of interdependent co-arising, which are, it's another Buddhist construct for how everything comes into existence and how it all fades away. And then it says the 4 noble truths. So it's really just a layout of all the major teaching points, core teachings of Buddhism, and telling us not even to get attached to our own tradition and our own forms of practice, to be truly free. Practicing to bring a sentinel of mindfulness to our consciousness, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind, is a way that we can learn how to protect our capacity for awakening. We've been talking a lot about nourishing the capacity for awakening, nourishing the seed of peace in us, seed of happiness, the possibility of well-being. By growing that, we've been putting a lot of energy into the nourishment side. We also need to protect it. And we can protect it best when we understand. We understand what's happening, where our tender places are, where our vulnerabilities are, and not necessarily barricading them behind walls, but choosing to move through our daily life, the way we speak and listen to each other, the way we consume, and so on, so that it protects the capacity to stay fresh, to stay happy, to stay joyful. If you're a therapist, right, and you see many clients in a day, one after another, you need to protect your capacity to listen deeply. If you do not, you won't be able to do your work very well, and you may collapse at a certain point, not having protected that capacity. We can't just only expose ourselves to hardship and suffering. We won't make it very far. So now we're going to the lower half of the diagram to make it more complicated. These are all words to describe things that are in store consciousness. Store consciousness contains the print of all the patterning, all the things we have learned and that our ancestors have learned. So it manifests, and there are seeds, potentials, but sometimes that is manifesting as a habit energy or as memory, right? As the conditioning that we've gone through and the ancestral transmission, previous generations' experience. So all of that is moving up into the heart and mind, and all of life is coming into the heart and mind, and this is the place that we do our careful work, tending our happiness and caring for our pain. One of the ways of understanding what we're doing is, you remember when the seed of suffering arrives in us. We talk about dealing with painful emotion, and the seed of suffering. Too bad. No good. The seed of suffering arises. In our consciousness. It's here manifested as this flower. And then we see that it's there, and we breathe and we walk and we care for it as best we can. We bring all our energy of practice to embrace it. It's manifested here in this flower. Wrapping around our suffering the strength and the capacity of our love and our understanding. The time spent together between the two flowers, they affect each other. If the suffering is too strong, it would overwhelm our practice. And that's when we know that we need more support from other people and more practice to generate energy. But if there's enough practice energy to hold our suffering, then the suffering is impressed upon by our practice. And as it calms down and goes back to the form of a possibility, a seed, it carries with it the print of our practice. This is really important, right? So if I spend 5, 10, 15 minutes being able to be with my suffering in a new way, instead of letting it call the shots, and instead of pushing it and covering it and running from it, but just holding it, feeling it, listening to it, as it calms down, it carries my practice with it. Now next week, when someone says something or does something and that seed of suffering comes up in me again, it comes up with the mark of my previous practice in it. You know this, the thing we do always, you know, like the kid who went fishing and they're like, I caught a fish and it was this big. And then they tell the story again, it was this big. It was this big. And if they told the story 10 or 15 times over the course of several years, I would wager that they don't actually know how big the fish was when they caught it. Because every time that we recall something, which is what's happening when the seed of suffering comes up, or it's coming up, it's being recalled into our experience. Every time we recall something, the context in which we recall it becomes a part of it. And so if the context is our practice of embracing and holding, that is now a part of that memory of suffering. It goes back down to seed form, and it remembers our practice too. And so as the seed of suffering comes up, it's not that it's transformed in the sense of gone away, but it's transformed in that now there's some understanding, there's some spaciousness, there's some mindfulness that is connected to it or even a part of it. And it feels different. And if we repeat that practice again, each time, the mark of our practice grows stronger. The way in which we understand what has happened and what we're experiencing changes, grows, transforms. And so over time, the seed of suffering becomes something very different than what it was before. As our practice moves into it and becomes a part of it. Tai would always say, if you suffer and you know how to suffer well, then you suffer less. And that's what he means, this practice. If you're able to grow your practice in relationship to your suffering, to know your suffering, then you suffer less. And again, it's not the point of getting rid of it, trying to be in some beautiful pure land where there is absolutely no pain or suffering or hardship. Because a land like that would also have no compassion, no understanding. when I think of this, there's also some neuroscience and neurobiology which has been worked on in recent years that supports this kind of practice. One of the ways and one of the things we've understood is that when there's habit energy in store consciousness, if that seed is touched in us, you cannot stop it from arising, from affecting you. If I have a lot of agitation, a lot of stress, and it's like building up as frustration and anger in me, but I'm managing through my daily life, and then that one person or one thing happens that just too much, suddenly anger manifests. The habit energy, the energy of it is there under the surface, ready, and gets to that last condition and suddenly takes over this space. You can't stop that from happening if it's there, right? But you can change the way it will happen in the future, right? That's when the seed of suffering comes up and you take care of it, it carries the care with it. So each time the strong energy of suffering comes up, that we care for it, we transform the way it will come up in the future. This has been really helpful for me when I take this from the micro personal level and I expand it to think of my family, the dynamics in my family, the relationships in my family, the kind of habit energies that are there under the surface. It operates the same way, right? As a collective, when certain conditions come together and certain seeds are watered, our behavior collectively manifests because it's already there, it's been grown. But how we handle it, each moment that we're together experiencing that, determines how it's going to manifest in the future. Similarly, when I think about the big stories of suffering in society, right? Take this micro lens and make it macro, make it big, and realize that there are great habit energies of suffering, ancestral transmissions of suffering, the way various peoples relate to each other. An intense memory, stories and conditioning of pain. It's all strong there, and for many generations human beings have just been totally unskillful in the way that they handle each other. Falling into the trap of thinking that we can solve a problem through violence by just eliminating, getting rid of the suffering. Eliminating what we think is the suffering. Defending ourselves from the things that we think are threats to us. And this is a kind of understanding which does not have anything to do with looking deeply beneath the surface. It's all on the level of there's me and you, there's us and them. It's all the different waves manifesting as different waves on the surface of the water. No one's touching the water. Because when you touch the water, there's no separation between you and the other wave. So trying to eliminate it is to eliminate yourself. Doesn't make any sense, right? So these big situations of suffering in the world are like huge forces of habit energy that when the conditions are right, they get watered and boom, we have terrible situations of violence and hatred manifesting. And it's really important that we not fall into the trap of accidentally escalating that in the way that we take care of it, right? By strengthening the sense of division and discord, or right or wrong. It's really important how we take care of those situations collectively, and that we're able to support our collective powers, however they manifest as families, as local organizations, as nations, or whatever, and how we support these. I wouldn't even call them institutions, I would say our various layers of our human community, right? That we contribute the possibility that we can change the way this will happen in the future. You know? And it's terrible to hold a situation of violence and pain that involves many thousands and thousands of people. But when I'm thinking about it along these terms, I have a pathway for my compassion. I have a way to contribute. I know that me as an individual, right, I am going to practice to take care of this situation and not to cause an escalation or a strengthening or hardening of the habit energy. And that if enough of us are doing that, then we are planting the seeds for transformation in the future. But if collectively we just fall into the game of tit for tat and right and wrong and justifying this and justifying that, then we're only going to keep the habit energy strong. Yeah. But this practice helps me to see, wait, I have something to contribute here. The way in which I hold how this is affecting me, the way in which I represent that practice in my various layers of community, yeah, is part of the way of holding it all together. So each one of us is not irrelevant when we're looking at these conflicts between nations and religions and so on. We're not irrelevant. We're not on the sideline. We are the global community that's doing this holding. Right? Mm-hmm. And we are so fortunate to live in vast lands where there is so much more resource and a sense of safety than in many places in the world. And we also need to be aware that the reason why we have this, right, some of the supporting reasons why we have this sense of safety, and it feels like a distance from some of these immense sufferings in the world, it's because we are keeping them away. We have pushed them away from our borders and our policies, all of that. Yeah. So we are very much a part of these situations that appear to be on the other side of the planet. They are very much a part of our lives, actually. And when our hearts can open with an understanding of our brotherhood and sisterhood, our shared humanity, that is the depths of the water, then maybe we'll be able to express a little more compassion as a collective for many of the places in the world that have been where our fear of suffering, of going through hardship, has been sort of pressed itself outward and made tension and stress in other places. So we're doing the work of transforming Alaya consciousness. And I would like to bring it back to sort of, it's easy to get carried into the intensity of feeling strongly about situations in the world, that the way that we walk on retreat or in our own homes. Remember Tai doing walking meditation in the hotel stairs, right? The way in which we do these things is part of how we're carrying, generating the energy to do the embrace, both in our life and in our collective, our shared life as humanity. Our Alaya consciousness in Buddhist psychology is defined as being both individual and collective, right? So the seed of suffering in me is my seed of suffering, but it is also a collective seed of suffering, and there actually isn't a separation there. When you look deeply into the seed of suffering, how many other people are you going to find there, right? And how many generations are you going to find there? It's not really ours. It's experienced as ours individually, but it belongs to all of humanity. So we're directly related. The seed of peace in me. It's the same. And the more that I can be careful in the way I live my life and conduct my relationships and livelihood, the more that I experience the practice becoming a part of my daily life, the stronger the seed of peace for me as an individual will be manifesting. And then that has its ripple effect. It is the same seed of peace, because inside that are all the people and conditions that support that experience for me, that have taught me how to do that. And we are transforming Alaya consciousness through the way we live our daily lives. And that transformation determines the future. Okay, cool. This is a good segue into transformation bodies. I'm going to borrow this flower for a second. A transformation body is a term in Buddhism to describe one way of describing interbeing in our shared life. So when you look at this flower and you look deeply at this flower, we can see many things inside the flower. For example, sunshine. The flower and the sunshine are very connected, aren't they? So if you were to understand that the flower and the sun are connected, can we ask this question? What would happen if we took the sunshine out of the flower?
Die.
Yeah, it wouldn't be there, right? It couldn't manifest. Could the flower be here if there was no sun as a part of the flower? Right? It couldn't. And so what that means, so what we're looking at here is not a flower, we're looking at sunshine. Well, we just determined that, right? I know the mind says, yeah, okay, interesting. Right? No, we just determined that if you took the sun out of the flower, right, the flower couldn't be there at all. It's not like a sunless flower. Flower won't manifest without sun. So this is sunshine. That's what's called a transformation body. So the flower is the transformation body of the sun. Also, inside the flower are many other things, like minerals, the earth element. And if you were to take the earth element out, no flower either. It's also part of the equation. So the flower is also the transformation body of minerals of the earth. You can look into the flower and see so many amazing things. And each one of them, if you took it out, flower really can't be there. Some seem a little more distant, some a little closer and more direct. That's just the mind creating important and unimportant ideas. The reality is that the flower is a transformation body of so many things. Now, we've all been looking at the flower. And these ideas that we're thinking about right now, about transformation bodies, they're alive and awake in our hearts and minds right now because of the flower. So we are now a little bit of the transformation body of the flower. But the flower is a transformation body of sunshine. So we are also the transformation body of sunshine and earth and so much more. In a way, it seems so simple, and in another way, it's very profound. And if you would like this experience to go beyond just a set of neat ideas, it's really fun to talk with kids about, by the way. If you would like it to go beyond just a set of neat ideas, all you have to do is slow down a little and let these thoughts live in your heart and mind for a few breaths so that you can feel what they mean. And suddenly, the image, the impression of the flower as white petaled, green stems and leaves, this image of it on its surface becomes so much more in a different place from the intellect. But the intellect helped us get there. That's the cool part. The kind of thinking, of interbeing, of continuation. The sunshine continues into the flower and becomes a transformation body. Right? The flower becomes a transformation body for sunshine. That kind of thinking. If I really breathe and let myself feel what that means, I drop from like a topical perceiving way to a deeper way of touching things. There's two truths. Oh, no microphone. There's two truths that we talk about in Buddhism. The first truth is the truth relative. A relative truth, where things are always in relationship to one another. So things are separate. Right? You're seated, I'm standing. I'm here, you're there. Not too long ago, this was my up, and my daughter's up was that way, because she was in Australia. Right? And it's relative. Depends on where you're standing and how you're looking at it. And we can evolve all sorts of things like up, down, better, worse, failure, success, being alive, being dead, beginning, end. The practice we did last night, and this way of looking at transformation bodies, seeing the continuation of one thing into another, is dropping us from the surface of the water, the relative dimension of things, the relative truth, to what we call the ultimate. And this is a word that refers to something that words cannot grasp. It's really important to understand that. You might think of it as if you had a coin, and there's like heads and tails typically on a coin, right? I actually know if that's the case. Or is that just like something from the US quarter? Tails, white tails. It's not like a tail on the other side. Right, okay, anyways, two sides of a coin. And that's not what this is. Because each side of a coin is in relationship to the other side. That's the relative dimension. In the image of the coin, the ultimate would be represented as the metal. The metal out of which both sides are minted. Right? And the image of the water and the wave, it's the same. All the waves could be seen as individual or separate or up or down or whatever, beginning and ending. But water is what they are all. made of, and they are never not water. So the ultimate truth lives in and around and through everything that we're experiencing in the relative dimension, and the relative dimension expresses in one shape or another the ultimate dimension always. There's really no separation there. So you don't have to go far. That's how far you don't have to go. Look at the flower, see the sunshine, spend some time with that thought. What is it like to be a flower receiving the sun? And I'm now, if I allow myself to experience beneath the grasping intellectual version of this picture, just to feel and experience what's inside that, I'm already in the water. I'm already touching the ultimate dimension. And the more we touch the ultimate dimension like that, the more solid our experience becomes of touching the ultimate dimension, the more we are able to be present with the ups and the downs of daily life without feeling overwhelmed by them, carried away by them. Things will still go up, things still will come crashing down. But the Bodhisattva rides upon the waves of birth and death beautifully, serenely. And the reason why the Bodhisattva can do that is because their heart and their mind is also dwelling in the ultimate dimension. They are also touching that ground. It's something we can practice. And if we practice it regularly and diligently, that experience becomes a resource for us and a way for us to hold, right? I'm really able to hold the ups and downs of my suffering and my joy with presence and compassion, with equanimity, with peace, because my part of me is dwelling in the ultimate dimension. And if I'm connecting with that, this suffering I have has a home, and it's okay. And it's far less suffering. And sometimes it even goes away completely, because sometimes my suffering is made of misperceptions of separation and differences and judgments. And in the ultimate dimension, those things have no basis for arising. So practice it. This is not a theory. It's not a way to get a mental grip on what's going on in our lives or in the world. It's an intellectual construct to help us transform the suffering that we have. When my brother-in-law died, he died at age 35. He had a young son. With my sister. It was kind of like not a natural cycle, right? That's not natural time for someone to die. We would say if someone were 95, you would expect that, right? But when they're 35, now you don't expect that. So in my mind, I wasn't set up, I wasn't prepared at all for this change. It was very sudden. He was actually killed as a bystander in some violence in El Salvador. And it happens so quickly, and you're thrust into a kind of suffering, a place of suffering and loss. And I was even suffering in my reaction to this so much that I felt anxiety calling my sister, right? I knew I needed to call her. I knew I needed to talk to her, to try to be there for her. But I felt fear around doing that. It's what? How? How do you hold something like this? And my nephew, how to relate to him in a moment like this, when such a big part of your world sort of turned upside down. It's just gone now. that was me approaching that situation in the relative dimension with expectations of lifespan. Talked about this last night in Touching the Earth, right? That my brother-in-law should have lived longer, right? And because of that idea, right, it's not what happened. And now I'm not in touch with reality. I'm now in my expectations, in my desires, in my wants, in my love and my care, but really also kind of off my footing. Not connected to what actually happened, and not wanting what actually happened to have happened. And suffering a lot. This experience of loss, and knowing that my other family members, like my sister and my nephew, were suffering even more. Whenever it was, some days after he died, I got a slideshow. I wasn't able to be present at the funeral, and I got a set of pictures emailed to me from that ceremony. And while I was flipping through them, looking at them, connecting with that moment to honor and connect with my family and be present for my brother-in-law in that moment. I saw, the colorful expressions of life of all the family and the love and everyone gathered around in the pictures. And I started to cry, to weep, because I just felt so sad, right? And in that moment, is the moment, surprisingly, when I finally decided, okay, I should stop resisting that this is where we're at and get in touch with where we're at. So it's like there was all this suffering coming up, and I was just like, I didn't want to meet the reality of what was there. But when I looked at the pictures, it kind of cracked me open. I said, okay, and then I started to breathe and to hold what I was feeling. And entering into that upright relationship with what was going on fully on all the layers of my being. And so that expression of energy could happen through tears and weeping and feeling my heart open with love really, instead of being held in the tightness of the shock and the resistance to it. And I found myself practicing embracing, and then I found myself also right away able to begin to look deeply. And I couldn't look deeply before then. I couldn't get into this space where I was going to look with eyes of interbeing or transformation, continuation, look for transformation bodies, in a sense. But I did then. I began right away. And I felt so much more spacious and grounded. And my anxiety over connecting with my sister or my nephew just went right away. Especially because of this practice of looking deeply with eyes of interbeing. And if this were my brother-in-law, I was looking into him to see, how have you come to be? What are you the transformation body of? And who is your transformation body? Right? My nephew is right there. Right? So the transformation body of my brother-in-law is my nephew. Right? Okay, let me just breathe and hold that. And the deep feeling of connection and love and stability and freedom is there. My brother-in-law's name was Constantino. Tino was not gone. Tino already had transformation bodies everywhere. One of them was my nephew, his son. I was a transformation body of Tino through all the experiences that I've shared, things that inspired me about him, things I loved about him. They weren't gone. Those are a part of me. They're a part of stored consciousness within me. And if I open my heart and my mind to feel that, to meditate on that and allow that to become real, I'm going beneath the surface of there was a wave there and now there's no longer a wave. The water was there before, the water is there now, the water will be there. Right? And I was going beneath the surface to connect and to find him. This is an example of practicing, right? But you have to take the time to do it. It's not just ideas, but to really sit down and somewhat methodically use as an object of meditation those who you love. Look deeply into them. Find the transformation bodies that they are. Find the transformation bodies that are already out in the world, that are them. Find the connection in that way. And by doing so, you just expand this idea that a person is in their body in a particular place and limited like that, which is, it's not true. That's just the way it looks on the surface, right? When you look at the ocean, all you see are the waves. You don't see all that water beneath, but it's there, right? And we all look like this. We all look like we're just in our bodies, getting sick, getting old, dying, young or old, right? We think that that's an end of us or a huge change that we're going through, but that's only one facet of who we are. And we have to look deeply to see more. And if we do that, right, the ups and the downs of life, the beginnings and the ends, the deep changes with like sickness and aging and all of that, they all can be held with much more stability, much more freedom. If the story that we're telling ourselves in our hearts and minds is that the life that we had, that we wanted, isn't possible, or the person that we love is no longer there, and that's the story that we're telling ourselves, how do you think we're going to feel? How are we going to experience those moments? There will be a deep sense of loss and suffering. But if the story that we are telling ourselves, that we are growing in ourselves, in our hearts and minds, is one of looking deeply, of seeing the transformation, seeing the continuation of our life and our loved ones' lives, and really experiencing them as being more than just in their body and in that space and in that moment, but far more vast, then the experience we're going to have, right, will be filled with that spaciousness, with that deep connection, with that peace. I always love the way that Tai described how after 6 years he was able to finally meet his mother after she died. And he resisted it for 6 years. And then one day when he was out on the deck in the moon, contemplating the moon in the sky, breathing in and out, he connected with his mother, and he felt the moonlight on his cheek like her caress. And he allowed the moonlight on his cheek to be the touch of his mother. Of course, his mom never touched him like that. I mean, she was not moonlight in her body, she was in her body. But by looking deeply, he found that experience of being with the moonlight was like perfect for connecting with his mother. That's what she meant to him. Yeah. Who's in your hand? All of your mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers. They're here. Just like you can't take the sun out of the flower, you can't take all of them out of your hand. This hand could offer a gentle touch that my mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers with their own bodies could not. cannot maybe anymore in the old form, but in the transformation body they can. And if that's the experience I'm cultivating, then loss is not happening. Right? Disconnection, the sense of separation is not happening. It's the opposite. So we use the ultimate truth, this dimension of our experience that is beyond grasping. We use it to create the experience in the relative dimension. Right? That's what I'm doing when I describe this. Right? My hand in the relative dimension is manifesting from the ultimate dimension the presence of all of my ancestors. Yeah. And I would like that to manifest peacefully, beautifully. In the way that I walk, in the way that I breathe, in the way that I listen and spend time with my children, the way that I participate in growing community. Every moment of my life is an opportunity for that expression. Please take time to organize your lives so that you can have moments of touching life deeply. So your true freedom, your true peace can be a part of the world so that you can receive that nourishment. We know that if we just follow along with the habit energy of the collective of society, the emotional tugs, pushes and pulls of it all, that it won't bring us that peace. We have to be clear with ourselves and in our lives. Find those moments to do it. Nourish and protect the possibility of an awakened life, of a peaceful life. Listen to the bell.